Hold up. America's health crisis. As y'all know, like I know, it seems like there's always some kind of new virus coming out. Celestials, prophetic message about America's health crisis. You might want to watch this one all the way to the end. Drop down in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as well. Check this out.
Later on in the morning, when I was reflecting on this dream, because it was such a curious dream, and I was thinking, Lord, how have I seen these things? The population did not look healthy at all, Lord. They didn't exactly look outwardly sick, Heavenly Father. I'm not saying that they were, with the exception of the flaking, okay? I didn't say that I was seeing people with visible manifestations of disease and plagues, but in general, the population did not look well. And I was just reflecting on that. And I was saying, God, what is this exactly? And He started laying it in my heart that it will be how Americans are being born in the future. It will be how they're being born. That's one. But then also once born and starting to carry on the arc of their life from youth until death, He was showing me how badly and how rapidly the people in this country will start to age. And it is a lack of grace that God will be basically showing America a lack of grace, a lack of favor, a lack of His presence, a lack of the things that beautify. The presence of God really beautifies. It's called, in the Catholic faith, they actually called it beatification because of how they depict a saint's face with so much light when that person is in a direct relationship with God and things like that. That's one way that they represent it. But when God withdraws from a population, it really does start to go dark. It doesn't only go dark in the hearts of people, such that their sin becomes a whole lot more blatant, a whole lot more open. They're less abashed by sin, meaning that you committing the sin, you're not ashamed of the sin. But then opposite, the ones observing sin are not abashed by sin either. They begin to express sentiments like, let people live. Let people live. Let people be free. Stop judging people. Give people space. Even Christians have this language in their mouth. That is actually evidence of the departure of God from among a society. When God leaves people, they're less ashamed by sin. They're more likely to commit sin. They're more likely to commit sin without feeling bad, meaning that their conscience slowly begins to switch off. They begin to switch off the voice of conscience. Sin will switch off the voice of conscience, and sin will very loudly amp up the voice of pride. Why are you talking to me about this? Are you perfect? Are you perfect? Why are you judging me? Americans cannot deny that they see all these things. It's not even creeping into the society. It's rampant in the society. It's the calling card of our society. It's the signature, the John Hancock at the bottom of American society. Being degenerate, being sin, not wanting to be rebuked for sin, not wanting to be told what sin is. You don't want to hear your particular issues ever coming out in a video, because then what you do is you start typing, I feel attacked. I just feel like there's a gray area. There's no gray area when it comes to sin. Just like there's only heaven and hell, there's only two holding posts for souls. Righteous souls go to heaven to be with the Lord forevermore, in His kingdom, His eternal kingdom that will never end. And unrighteous souls will be separated from Him forever into the lake of fire. There's no gray area there. The Bible is as black and white as you want. So human beings, though, not wanting to comply with either righteousness or to just say, you know what, I want to be a reprobate and I don't care. I'll pay the consequences for sin that comes after. Let me go to hell. They don't want that. They desire a gray area. And the way that it manifests very heavily in our society is through debate. People love to debate, but you know, what about if God did this? Whenever you hear people with that language in their mouth, that's a person who actually is not wanting to be judged with the sheep on the right side. They don't want to be judged with the sheep. They don't want to accept that God has the right to set boundaries, parameters, rules, to create a catchment area where He says, all those who fall in this area will belong to me. Anybody who falls out in the badlands, the gray area, they want to call it. I call it judgment, but let them call it the gray area. Anyone who falls in the outer areas outside of my catchment area, outside of my barn, I call them chaff. I called them children of disobedience, upon whom wrath abideth. Anyone who wants to be in that area is going somewhere else. God is black and white, but because people do not want to acquiesce to God, meaning that they don't want to agree to what the standards God has set, they don't want to bow their knee just yet, because it requires time, it requires humility, it requires submission, it requires elbow grease, it requires them taking responsibility, having to be accountable, having to be more mindful about the choices they make, the company they keep, the words they speak, the emotions that they allow to wash over them, because that seems like too much work. In U.S. society, the way the rebellion of the people manifests primarily is through conversation. But what is all this? And how can we be sure this is really the mind of God? And really, what would be accomplished by having this discussion and making these changes and shaming these pastors and exposing this sin? What are we really working towards here? Satan has gripped this nation and convinced it to fall into degeneracy because of its love for logic, because of its love for superior conversation, not knowing that most of the time God is pretty much a meat and potatoes conversation guy. I want you to do this, Celestial. You go and do it. I want you to stop doing this, Connor. You stop doing it. Imagine God gives you a directive and then you're like, what is this in aid of, really? What are we trying to accomplish with all that? That's what people want to do. And because they don't have the muster to do it with God, they do it with people who are trying to be busy doing what God wants from them. They want to have those conversations with people who are not minded to have conversations. And then when you don't want to have the conversations with them, they say, you see, I can't have a discussion with you. Why on earth would anyone want to have a right-minded discussion about you and your plans to go to hell? That doesn't involve me at all. Make those plans and execute them by the power of whatever it is that you're working with. That's what many of you should tell your family. If these are the choices you're making, just know that there's consequences for it. But when those consequences come back to bite, you cannot gaslight, you cannot backpedal, you cannot start crying as if this is the first time that you're hearing it. If you allow people to know that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, then later when the equal and opposite reaction catches up with them, yes, you can show compassion, but at the same time, there still has to be accountability. Even Jesus deals with us that way. So why do you want to be more merciful than Jesus in how you're dealing with people in your lives? Sin manifests where there's no standard. Sin manifests where there's no boundary. That's why every other word in the Bible is a boundary. Every other directive in this thing is not a suggestion. It's actually a standard that we're being held accountable to. Now, the only question that remains to be solved is, do you want to be held accountable? Do you want to actually rise to the standard, or do you want to fall below it? And those are not questions. Those are not questions. It's not something that you need to debate. It's a yes or no answer. But to avoid having to give that yes or no answer, this is why people go into the gray area of conversation and debate. But can we look at it another way? No, you can't. There's no law of God that you can look at another way. Once the law is laid, it only has two sides, being on the wrong side of it or being on the right side of it. And that's all that remains. So that was what God was showing me, these various genetic defects coming at a high level. And he was saying that actually it's just a sign that he's not with the population. And with God, when God withdraws from you, as you will hear continuously in this prophecy, as I continue, the ugly in humanity starts to come out. God is the one who beautifies us by his Holy Spirit and washes us by his blood, which is why we then, before him, we have an accepted and a righteous appearance. But once he withdraws from us, then truly the ugly in humanity starts to come out. And so the Lord then said, when I was telling him that the population just looks different and different in a very obvious and negative way, not like, oh, that person has that disease. It's not a manifestation so much of disease. It's just a manifestation of some type of ain't right in how people were being born and starting to look. Then what he said was, there will also be transfer. This is generationally from parent to child, of a lot of depressed and repressed genomes. So this is the area of DNA, biology, more complicated, things like that. He said that genes in the body, which have always been dormant, and the example he gave is having an extra digit on the hand or the foot. There are multiple prophecies covering that. I'll leave them in the description for you. Having an extra digit on the hand or the foot, he said, they will start to express themselves far more frequently than not. Thus far, people have been born, and any strange expressions of genes, such as being born with extra body parts, maybe there's cases where people have been born with one jaw, but with double rows of teeth, which is something that the Nephilim have. You see, the baby has an inner row in there and then an outer row. That is definitely something that the Nephilim used to have. Being born with extra body parts, being born as Siamese twins. These are twins that share, I think, too much of the body. They're born with two heads and one body, or sometimes it might be a lesser Siamese, whereby everybody has a separate body. Those are called conjoined twins, where everybody has a separate body, but then they're joined sometimes at the shoulder and at the body here, and they can, with good surgery, be separated. Being born blind, being born deaf, being born with physical deformities in the limbs, being born with a cleft palate. This is where a baby is born and the entire face is open. Cleft palate has something to do with the face, the nose, and the upper jaw, sometimes even the lower jaw. Depending on how bad it is, the person's entire face can be separated into two so that you don't have continuity like most of us express when we're born. He said, these things have always been, in general human society, the exception, not the rule. But he says now, because of the sin that is resting upon America, and because his favor is no longer being released on a general, keeping, protecting, day-to-day basis, whereby a woman is pregnant, fine, she's got her own genetic expression, fine, she's carrying now the genetic expression of her husband melded together with her own genes, but then she's prayerful as a righteous woman. She's anointing her belly with oil. She's lifting up prayers to God for the safe delivery of the baby. She's asking God for two eyes. She's not just kicked back and flicking channels, assuming that she has a right to two eyes just because she's got two and her husband got two and every baby comes with two. So let's just assume you'll have two eyes. And oh, you know what? Let's just go ahead and assume that the two eyes will be working non-blind. Careful parents are laying hands on the infant in the womb and speaking life and health over that infant and infusing the blood of Jesus into that infant and saying, we cover you with the blood of the Messiah that has saved us and kept us healthy and kept us out of the hospital and keeps us waking up on the right side of the bed every day and protects us and guards against this and that. We cover you, little one. And then at the end, you get your bundle of joy. Yes, shaped by genomes, but protected by the Creator. Psalm 139 is the entire storyline of how we are created, how we are made in the dark womb, the darkness of the earth, the secret hidden place of our mother's womb. Psalm 139 explains the whole process, that even the days that we will live are pulled out by the Lord, and then He will decide where to cut it. All of that King David knew without having access to Alexa, Siri, or nothing. He did not need Wikipedia to understand innately that we are shaped by the Master's hands and that all our times are in His hands. But because God is not regarded in the society, and it will be even worse as we go on. It will be even worse as we go on. The Lord said that His favor will no longer be released on a general basis in the country. And so He says, you're going to start to see, instead of infants just come out even like, oh, it was the skill of the doctor and he's blonde like his father and he's got the curly hair of his mom or whatever. It's going to be a case where you will see these repressive genes are able to break through more and more. So what is God saying? God is telling all the science-based, peer-reviewed, is there a study for this? Americans, that actually science is subjected to the heart of God. Science itself, the science of, yes, we know how eyes work. We know how sound comes out of the throat. We know by what means we are ambulatory, meaning by what means humanity is supposed to move and stay bipedal and upright, not going on all fours like our animals. We know all that. Science is a study of how. How does this work? How does this work? How does this work? Science very rarely can answer the question of why. In fact, science likes to pretend that the greater question of why. Science can tell you how the eye works. Science can never tell you why the eye is like that. It can tell you, oh yes, the eye has a retina back there and a cornea back there, and it has a shutter mechanism. They don't know why it's like that. It's because it pleased the Creator to make it like that. He made our eye to be a single shot eye and to have peripheral vision. Nobody can tell us why we don't have the compound eye of a spider or a fly, because God decided that we didn't need that many CCTV cameras, especially with the brains we have. We would be totally confused looking at 500 multiple images. Those animals are small and need to quickly move. So that's the eye he gave them. Science can never tell you what was the decision in the heart of the designer to give the fly and the spider that eye, but give us a single shot lens that can zoom in and out and is limited, but the eagle's eye pivots all over the place and can zoom hundreds of yards ahead, far beyond what a person can see, an eagle can see. Science cannot tell you the differentials in that. So whenever you come to the why question, science will give you a how answer, but then try to sound very authoritative and firm so that you actually think the how answer is an answer to a why question. It is not. Science bows its knee to Yah, the Creator, who made the value decision based on metrics that are inside his heart alone. That I will design them like this, but I will design a horse like this, and I will make the fly like this. That's why evolution can't answer the question of why there's so many of us, because no one cell, if you say that it all started with a single-celled organism, where is the right of choice operating within a single cell that we know is the most simplistic building block of life? How did that single cell decide, I'm going to stop expressing as a monkey and I'm going to express as a giraffe, and I'm bored with that, I'm now going to become a hawk? What is the explanation for how one cell simply decided to become the multiplicity of flora, fauna, and human beings, different races, different ethnicities, completely different flows, and also split into a man and a woman, the male and the female? There's too much burden on Western science to explain the complexity of the world that we live in. And what Yah is saying in this prophecy is that he's going to move back, and we're going to see how we start coming without him. If we don't want midwife Jesus near the births of the babies, we're going to see how the babies start coming. And so he's talking about extra body parts, Siamese twins, conjoined twins, being born blind, being born deaf, being born with your face split open in a cleft palate, being born with contorted limbs, okay, not being born straight, supple, smooth, lithe, like that. And he says it's linked actually to sin. So prepare for the scientific community to give you a how answer. Oh no, because of there's less fulvic minerals in our food and the pesticides. They're going to tell you environmental factors. God says the environmental factor is him. He's going to withdraw, and he's going to allow sin to basically sink into our bones like lead, and then it's going to express itself in how we're being born. He said babies are going to increasingly come with the repressed gene expression that he used to hold back. So the dad is carrying something. Great-grandfather had it, grandfather had it, dad had it. But it was always a repressed gene. It never came out. Maybe it's sickle cell. Sickle cell has been running in the bloodline, but the family is righteous. The family knows God. The family serves God. But then future descendants start allowing sin in. They start to walk in unholy ways. They start to walk in unrighteousness. And then now more and more and more, they're becoming reprobate. And with the internal reprobate, darkened, shrunken nature of their heart, their genetic code, no longer given over to righteousness, begins to shift over to unrighteousness. And that repressed gene that Jesus always had his hand on, because sickle cell is terrible, and in a lot of people, it's actually a death sentence. A lot of young people don't make it into adulthood carrying that gene. Jesus always had his hand on that thing. So Jesus always knew it was there. Maybe one random person 50 to 100 years ago had it. They prayed over that person, or something was done. And then that person managed to fight it off, grow up, have a normal life. But then it has been expressing that thing in the generational hierarchy, the bloodline. But then love of God and also righteousness of the family has been keeping that thing repressed, meaning it doesn't express itself. You have a baby, no sickle cell. You have a baby, no sickle cell. And then before you know it, it's 10 generations ago that grandpa kind of had it. They ask you now, is there sickle cell in your family? And you say confidently, no. You marry that woman thinking confidently, I don't have it. The daughter marries on, and then eventually, by passage of time, by departure from Christ, then you start to see the scientific output. Somebody shows up with it, and the family is shocked. They're wondering, how did this happen? God says it was always there, and now it's going to start to come out. So repressed genes, non-expressive genes, he says, are going to greatly start coming out instead of the healthy one. Instead of the healthy baby, people are going to start seeing the anemic baby, the colic and wind and constipation baby that carries over into adulthood, the blood problems, blood disorders, heart and lung diseases, kidney infections, muscle weakness, muscle atrophy. This is where the muscles are not growing at the right rate, and now you start to find children with physical deformities. Okay, these are things that America has conquered medically years ago. If there are any doctors that watch this channel, you're watching and you're thinking, we conquered these things years ago. Polio cannot possibly be a reality. But then why are you surprised we have tuberculosis breaking out in the country? When was the last time that America even gave a thought to tuberculosis? It's written in every American medical book as a third world disease. It's a third world problem. It's not fit for a first world country. So why is there an entire state that's battling an outbreak of that right now? Are you going to try and trace it to ground zero and then say it was somebody who came from Africa or something like that? These things are going to start to break out here, because God says long conquered sicknesses and diseases are going to make a resurgence. That means to not only come back, but to come back with force, like the ocean when it comes back in a tsunami after withdrawing offshore. So he says we're also going to see a lot of babies dying around the first 3-month mark of their life from unknown causes. So it's going to be known causes, but he says a lot of these baby deaths will be from unknown causes, and he says grief will come to America on account of her sin. The Lord also said, tell them that there will be a stiff increase in steroidal diseases. Steroid creams are going to be used more than ever before, even on the very young, as sores, plagues, and other types of lesions make a comeback, to where more than half of the population will be suffering with them or catching it from each other. This is straight nastiness. Straight direct. Because steroidal diseases, the most prevalent one is sexual diseases. Diseases that are venereal in nature. STDs, if you will. Tell them there will be a stiff increase in steroidal diseases. Steroid creams and medications are going to be used more than ever before, even on the very young, as sores, plagues, and other types of lesions make a comeback, to where more than half of the population will be suffering with them or catching it from each other. Steroid medication and creams, the use of it, will spike through the roof because of venereal diseases and other types of infections that start being drug resistant and very hard to treat. I repeat, these diseases will be very hard to treat, very stubborn as your hard hearts that do not listen to how to maintain a righteous posture and live in a holy way. Infections are going to rise and become commonplace. That eventually, instead of repentance, people are going to stop panicking about it and become convinced that living in such a high viral and bacterial environment is normal, when really, says the Lord, it is the wages of sin that is called rot. Rot is a decay or decomposition state. America will rot, and the people will become infectious, and carriers of all forms of bacteria never seen before, infecting and reinfecting each other in a cycle that is hard to break out of or treat. Eventually, two people will come to have the same viral or bacterial profile, and they can then live in peace, not worried about giving the other what I have. But Yah says eventually you will see the rates of infections will skyrocket, and they will experience die off from it. They will die off, Celestial. You will see these people are going to sicken at an enormous rate because of things that are being done to their water, their food, and their general environment. And eventually a high death toll is going to be promoted and accepted as normal, even though they will be able to see that they're not able to replicate themselves at the same rate. This is to punish them, that their number may be reduced due to the sins that have piled up at their doorstep, that they still refuse to acknowledge or even take responsibility for. So this is very distressing for God to start talking about steroidal diseases. I'm not sure if all the diseases that people get steroids for, but one of the things that's coming to mind right now is skin diseases and lesions. And that is what he was talking about here, saying that as America's disease profile begins to proliferate, meaning it begins to multiply itself very fast, whenever you start to see diseases just multiplying themselves very fast and mixing and melding, you start to get all these other bacterial and viral blends that people have not seen before. We do not know the full extent of what is possible in our world. And so that is why the medical community is constantly being surprised when something new pops up. Then they say, oh, we haven't seen this before. And then they try desperately to link it back to a grandfather or a cousin, like an earlier version of the disease, and say, well, it's kind of similar to. Why is that? Because it's natural. God has put it in us to want to classify everything. That is basically what Adam was doing at the beginning of his life. The Lord brought Adam, set him in the garden, and then brought all the animals to him and everything to see what he would name them. So it's an innate desire inside us to understand our world, to say, this is called a this is called a that, and this is called a that. We name everything, and that includes the sicknesses, the diseases, and the problematic issues that happen with our vessel, our human body. So doctors very much like to study anything that is behaving outside of, differently from, or completely opposite to what they have studied, cataloged, categorized, and named so far. But God says that we're going to start to see plagues and lesions and all kinds of things show up until it's even on very young people. And the impression I was getting is not so much that, oh, the young person, because it was babies that they were having to dab things on that I was seeing. It's not as if this young person has gone out and committed sin. It is because the young person is living in an environment. The young person is playing with other people at the daycare. The young person is maybe starting out the first grade with other first graders that are coming from varied homes in which moms, dads, older brothers, younger sisters have all kinds of expressions of sicknesses that this young one is then a carrier for, to a daycare with maybe a kid who's coming from a home that has nothing. And then there's this malicious transfer. And then that young one comes home. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Christian home. It can just be a home where the people are pleasant people. They don't have anything yet. The young one comes home bringing something into the home, and then before you know it, everybody else has it. Everybody else is getting the strange outbreaks, the marks, the scratchings, I've described so many different types of sores that I've seen here, especially in the COVID years. In the COVID years, during the time that we were locked up in the house, God was telling us absolutely and for sure that the world is going to be suffering pestilences, but America in particular in 2020 and 2021, when I was handling those COVID prophecies, God was telling me we are going to be a nation of fevers. We're going to be a nation of ague. Ague is a particular type of fever. You're burning up, and at the same time, you're drenched in cold sweat. You're burning up, but you're chattering, and you need 900 blankets. Your temperature is like 100 and whatever. It's very high. It's 41. It's 42. And at the same time, you're freezing cold. You can't get warm and things like that. And you're pouring out buckets of sweat. Your joints ache very much. And so God was talking about the resurgence of ancient diseases from the 1400s. The Black Death was one that was mentioned. God has mentioned Marburg on this channel before. He has mentioned the outbreak of very hard white, almost like marbles on the upper body. And then I think, I'm not sure if that's monkeypox that came out, and he was saying that, oh no, it will be a punishment for people, especially those in the alternative lifestyle. And then we started seeing that a few years ago. So he's mentioned a fever, a type of fever that will come to the United States that basically cooked people in their skin. I said that people looked so aged when they died. The fever ravaged them until their skin became crinkled and creased, and they died looking purplish. That is how much blood mottled or gathered and settled underneath, especially those with paler skin or lighter toned complexions. It was horrible. They aged, and the thing was so easily transferable that they were not allowing people to visit their loved ones. They were burning those bodies, and they were very careful, because even brushing up against the hair fibers of people after they died could prove fatal for those who were tasked to get rid of their bodies. And so before we get to that kind of sweeping pestilences, sweeping pandemics, Yah is talking basically about diseases that are going to increase and become very drug resistant. It's very hard to treat a drug-resistant strain of anything. Just a moment, please. Drug-resistant diseases are very frustrating because anything less than ideal health, automatically you know that it takes a personal toll. If you just suffer a simple cold for a couple of days, you feel under the weather, you have achy joints, you have a runny nose, you have a fever, you have hoarseness, you might have catarrh, which is that gross feeling of liquid just sheeting down the back of your throat. You don't feel optimal, and there's generalized muscle weakness and tiredness that goes along with catching the common cold, catching the flu. Now we have COVID-19 in our midst, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And so many things come upon a person when you're sick. But then non-optimally is the longer you sick, the longer you remain at ground zero, basically. The longer you're sick, the longer you're not feeling better, the more of a risk you pose to other people in the household. And that's why many households tend to be proactive. They're taking echinacea, they're taking elderberry syrup, they're taking all types of things. They're taking vitamin C. They're taking whatever they can to keep their immune system strong, to keep themselves healthy, to make sure that they have healthy kids, so that they avoid having to go off-road into a 5-day, 6-day sickness. But now when you start to get this thing, for instance, that they call long COVID, where people are saying that they've had COVID for half a year, who wants to be like that? And also, anything that is drug resistant, it means you're trying to treat it, but the locus point of what's causing the sickness is stronger than the treatment. And it takes time to develop treatments that are then stronger than the drug resistant strain of whatever it is that you're facing or whatever it is you're trying to conquer. And so you can hear God just basically telling us that it's going to become a crock pot.
At the end of the day, I hope that all my viewers take heed of the prophetic messages and discern what is really going on around them each and every day. Y'all must protect yourselves from everything that is going on in these last days and times. Sickness and health. It's very important to an individual in this day and time. There's all kind of diseases coming out. People are getting sick left and right. Pneumonia, coronavirus. I mean, you just really have to take heed to your health and be one with God and pray and fast so that he can cleanse you and protect you from all the things that are going on inside this world today. But hey, everyone has a thought and opinion. Make sure you drop down in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as well. Hey, I'll see y'all next time.